So, welcome to Unit 2. This is a multi-agency approach to planning, and we'll be doing some collaborative and getting to the essence of the planning process. For this unit, you'll be doing one IS course, 3 chapters from the Perry and Lindell book, and reading some charter documents and an operations manual. And of course, you'll be doing a quiz, your first quiz, one of 2 with this unit, which will be cumulative. So we'll go right into giving some context of the IS course. So we're looking at NIMS, the National Incident Management System, which is 701A, and rather than looking at the components of NIMS, I want you to see where NIMS is approaching how it fits into planning. And in other words, it's not a compliance piece, it's not an incident management piece, but it really takes the essence of emergency management planning into a couple of core components. And in particular, how those components fit into a wide variety of audience when it deals with emergency management. So look for it as a process rather than a compliance product, but think of it in terms of usages. So for those in the EMS community, you're probably familiar with resource typing, and that's one of the products, but it's a minor product. The process getting to resource typing is more important. In other words, it's more resource management, and that's dealing with, under all hazards context, multiple resources. It's not just a single hazard like firefighting, but rather just the total incident or community management. So you have to have multi-agency collaboration to do this. That's why it's important in NIMS. As I stated, it is a compliance tool, but don't emphasize on it. Know that it's there, but don't dwell on it. And again, it's not like a traditional incident command system where everything's been typed, everything's been resourced, everything has its place in a structure. It's more broadly based, more holistic, the overused term holistic type of incident management system. So that's 701 in the planning context of all hazard is knowing that it's a process. It's knowing the components, driving components in terms of guidance documents. And of course, it's not geared towards strictly incident command. The second thing that you'll be looking at is the Perry and Lindell readings. You'll be looking at the emergency planning process and focus as you get towards all hazards, how multi-agencies fit into preparedness, into response, into recovery and mitigation. For example, it's not exclusive like you see in the law enforcement, where you would catch the bad guys, it'd go to some sort of defense and prosecutor attorneys for judgment process and for judgment on the judicial side. It's more than that. It's combining lots of aspects of the disaster process. So, for example, in response to an incident, you might have casualties, which will involve health and your primary care physicians and the EMS community, which is completely different from your healthcare providers, which is completely different from a law enforcement aspects that you might have, which is completely different from public works. So there's a lot of multi-agency coordination that needs to be done in the emergency management process. But take it as you read through the chapters into context of how different agencies would fit into preparedness, response, and recovery and hazard mitigation. The next chapter you'll be reading is Fostering Emergency Management Planning Process, and this is where the chapters define who the principal players are in emergency management. Granted, you can't unfortunately can't plan for everything. For example, zombies and the zombie effect or vampires and Barrow, but there are some key elements towards, and tenants, if you will, tenant partners of emergency management. For example, healthcare is obvious one. Law enforcement, public works. There are the same 10 people that sit down at the table And this chapter will identify who those are. So pay attention to who the stakeholders are, and recognize that as an emergency manager, especially as a planner, you can't do this alone. You may have authority to declare, you may have authority to manage the incident, but ultimately you can't do it yourself because you don't own those resources. So that's what the crux of this chapter is about, is looking at those stakeholders and hence the multi-agency coordination. And finally, you'll be looking at the other readings introduced in the selected federal mandates. But as you go through those different types of mandates, look at it from a guidance perspective rather than a mandate, because if you look at the Stafford Act, which is the primary driver of emergency management, it's mostly geared towards recovery. It's not geared toward response. From a planning perspective, you as emergency manager are coordinators, not responders. So you're bringing in multi-agency groups to manage an incident. What does that mean? That means just because you have a statutory authority to get them in the same room, you may not necessarily have a statutory authority to have them execute within their own capacity. In other words, just because you can get a trooper to the table doesn't mean that you can get a trooper to arrest somebody. So look at it from a guidance versus a mandate perspective as you look at selected federal mandates. And then finally, you'll be looking at additional readings. The first reading that you'll be looking at is the State of Alaska's Multi-Agency Manual. Look and pay attention to the agencies involved. Just go through cursory the manual itself. I don't expect you to memorize it, but look through who's involved and what agencies involved and why they're involved. Look at the charter documents for that. Also look at the next document in terms of the same type of overall structure for the Alaska Partnership for Infrastructure Protection. Who are the stakeholders? Why are they there? And the composition of the group. For the State Air Coordination Group Manual, it's an operational document. Don't read through the operational air coordination piece. Look through how the group was composed of. A single event like air coordination, or single type of management structure like air coordination, although simple in concept, is complex in execution, meaning that it takes a group of people, whether it be DOT Corps of Engineers, not just the FAA and the state DOT entities, but it takes possibly 30 to 40 entities just to do this one piece of air coordination. So look for that piece and focus on that piece on that. And then finally, the State of Alaska's Administrative Order 203. This AO 203 actually created the State of Alaska's Homeland Security Emergency Management Division, and if you look at it, it was done on purpose with multi-agencies involved. You had folks from DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation, Department of Transportation, Department of Administration on the telecommunication and cybersecurity piece, Health and Social Services, Public Safety, and I think one more, but Department of Transportation. Or maybe I said that. So it's not just emergency management per se, but it's the collective assets that the state bears to doing Homeland Security and emergency management. So just read through the AO 203 and recognize that there's a multitude of agencies involved. And then finally, you'll be doing a quiz, which is cumulative for Units 1 and 2. It's a combination of multiple choice and fill in the blanks, which is done by traditional AB, cycling A, B, C, and D. You can only take it once, so make sure that you get all the answers right. It is open book, and it's a 20-question quiz, so it shouldn't take you too long. Concepts you'll recognize. I'm hitting on key points, so if you paid attention to Units 1 and 2, got through the readings, and did some analysis yourself, you should be okay with the quiz. So good luck. If you have any questions, give me a call or give me a shout out via email, and we'll talk to you with Unit 3.